based on the hotspot. Dia tak indicate dah kat mana ada positif dan sebagainya. Dia hanya beritahu dalam 1 kilometer radius ada banyak case positif. Okay. So itu yang menjadikan semua orang macam takut je. Right? So if you don't have anything and not that urgent, so make sure that you stay at home. So itu adalah iklan daripada penaja lah ya. Penaja government lah ya. We help the frontliner. Penat saya tengok yang abang saya tu kan, Tan Sri Nur Hisham kan. Kenapa kata abang? Terkejut semua orang. Ingat abang saya tak? Dia Abdullah, saya buat Abdullah kat belakang. Okay, so just a joke So saya actually kesian kat frontliner kita. So siapa yang kerja sebagai frontliner kat group ni, memang saya salute lah. Memang penat. My husband pun frontliner. So saya penat. Dah sebulan setengah. Ya, penat frontliner tu. Macam kita rasa macam dah fight nak dekat habis, dah tahu lagi ke third wave and so on. So frontliners penat sangat-sangat dah. Tapi ada juga segelintir rakyat yang rasa macam tak jenis yang tak ambil serius lah disebabkan tengok kalau pergi ke mamak store penuh lagi. Satu meja kecil 4 orang duduk, 5 orang duduk. So please stay safe and help our governments lah. Please help the frontliners by staying at home. Tak perlu buat apa-apa pun, by staying at home. If not that urgent and so on, please stay.
The sound, the noise from your microphone is too loud.
The sound?
The noise. I think
is it the noise Okay, CPU Sekejap. Sorry. Let me fix it. Tak dengar sangat ke ataupun Shan?
Dia ada bunyi bising sikit, betul.
Dia bunyi macam blender.
Bising alamak. Sekejap. Blender? Alright, wait. Sekejap I try to get another headphone. Students, kalau saya tak gunakan yang mikrofon ni, dengar tak? Kalau tak gunakan headphone ni.
Lebih clear, Doktor.
Lagi clear? Okay, I without using any headphone lah. Cuma saya kena word anak saya lah. Kejap lagi dia turun tu memang bising sikit lah. Alright, okay. Sorry saya dah test rasa okay. Alright. So this one is clearer lah. Cuma kejap lagi kalau anak dara saya turun, ada bising apa-apa tu, ignore je
Okay, betul.
Right. Do you see clearly? Alright. Okay, back to our topic. So today is actually we talk about requirements engineering. Okay, for last week overview, we know that we have software engineering as really important and it's a subset of the whole system engineering. Okay, from the system engineering, we emphasize on the hardware, on the software, on the process itself for the whole engineering of the system. So when we focus on the software engineering, okay, it's a process of producing, or we call it productions of the software. So that's why we call it software engineering. So inside the software engineering, there are a few important or fundamental processes that we have to follow. The first one is actually the requirements engineering. Okay, that is actually a very important first step. That is very important first step in order to make sure that a product actually is produced successfully and so on. So I'm taking these notes just for your information. So I'm taking these notes beside referring to the books that I in the right corner. Okay, so actually taking the notes is from the Certified Professional in Requirement Engineering. We call it CPRE. Okay, it's a partnership between NSTB and also the International Requirement Engineering Board. Just for your information, I'm a certified professional in requirement engineering. That's why I'm a certified requirement engineer. So actually, this course needs us to have 4 days very intensive training and intensive course about the theory behind the requirements engineering and so on. We do numbers of case studies before we sit for the exam in the fifth day of it. So and the passing rate is quite high. The passing in order to get a pass in this certification, it's need you to score 75 and above. Okay, 75 and above. Kalau you punya master's program, perlu you dapat 70 grade B. B is 70 and above. So this certification needs you to score B plus. Okay, sorry, it's not B plus, A minus. A minus. So it's a 75 and above, A minus 75 and above, then you can certify. So berdebar jugalah masa bagi kursus tu. Okay, disebabkan dalam 4 days you kena excel everything in the theoretically and how you're going to apply it in a case study, and you have to make a good decisions based on whatever scenario given to you and so on. Okay, alhamdulillah lah saya survive. Saya dapat tak tinggi pun dapat 82 je. 82 but enough lah untuk being certified as a requirement engineer. So this is actually I taking the informations, I taking the notes referring to the this certification. So you are going to see that some of the things is not inside the book. Okay, it's not inside the book. So the learning outcome for today's lecture, I'm going to break requirements engineering into 2 weeks. Okay, into 2 weeks. So this week I will going to cover until just before the requirement engineering processes, and the second part of it that will be next week. I will totally cover about the requirement engineering processes and also the management itself. Okay, so today I'm going to actually target to cover the first three, the first three of the learning outcome. That will be understand the concept between user requirement and the system requirement, and also what will be the differences between the functional and non-functional. Okay, so both user and system requirement can be subdivided into functional and non-functional. So we are going to discuss in today's lecture how and what is the differences between these requirements, terminologies, and so on. Before we actually put it into a documentation, we call it SRS, Software Requirements Specification. For those who really involved in the software development, you are going to actually very familiar with SRS. Okay, because from the SRS, you are going to actually whoever in really in the team of design, it's actually have to come out with some design before you can actually pass it to the software developers in order to program it. Okay, so that will be actually 3 learning outcomes that we I plan to cover by today's lecture. The other 2 are going to cover next week, inshallah. Right. So when we talk about requirements engineering, okay, when we talk about requirement engineering, as I mentioned in the early parts of the lecture, the requirements engineering is the first activities in whole software engineering, in whole software production. So why it is so important actually? So when we talk about the importance of the requirement engineering, we have to realize that a project, somehow software project failed because of few reasons. This is actually not limited to these four, but I highlighting the most important four here. Okay, the first one you are going to see, the first in the list that caused a project fail or the project failure is actually unclear requirements. Okay, unclear requirements. So for those who are already into have experience dealing with clients and so on, it's actually really difficult for us sometimes to capture the client needs. Okay, because they are in different field, different domains and so on. That's why some of the project managers who deal with the client getting some unclear requirements. So that's why that is the main things that we have to actually really careful about requirement engineering. The second failure here listed in this slides actually is related to politics. Okay, sekarang ni sensitif politics. Sebut je politik, mungkin adalah dalam ni ada spy juga. Beritahu ish, Dr. Atika ni sebut dalam politics, dalam lecture requirement engineering. Okay, so politics here is refers to actually some rhetoric can be saying that some of the politics actually overrules the requirements of the project. Okay, requirements of the project. They are giving the project to someone else that is not competent enough, however, have a relationship with them. So they are awarded with some project and so on. Okay, for those who work in the government agency, they might understand me more. Okay, because somehow as a project manager or as a software engineering in your team, okay, you already valued all the tenders and so on, requirement based on the competence and so on. You know that some of the team is not even fit to apply. However, due to some reason, they are awarded with the project and so on. So when it's awarded with them, they are not so competent in delivery. We call it subcon. Subcon dengan orang lain lah, bermaksud dia bagi sub ke orang lain buat dan sebagainya. So that is the things that making a project fail. Okay, regardless of in what types of in which area of government agency. Dalam military berlaku, dalam agricultural berlaku, banyak benda disebabkan politic issues and so on. Okay. The third one here is poor communications. Poor communications can be one of the factors that make a project fail. Okay, communications between as a project managers with your client, and also your project managers with your team members and so on. So poor communications become actually is obstacles for the project. Okay, and the last one listed here is poor stakeholder management. When we talk about stakeholders is actually not really limited to the clients. Whoever we're going to use the system, we can call a stakeholders. Okay, we can call them stakeholders. So whatever stakeholders, we have to actually manage it. Okay, especially for those who involved in the enterprise system management. Okay, enterprise system management is going to be a numbers of stakeholders in the enterprise system. So make sure that you have to really manage the stakeholders to know that what will be the what types of requirements coming from which stakeholders and so on. So when we take it from the specific stakeholders and so on. When you verify it, you have to refer to the stakeholders in order for the verifications and so on. Not the not a representative that is going to actually verify it on behalf actually. So that will be actually lead to the project failure. Okay, any things to add on for those who have experience? Ada tak apa-apa project failure yang you rasa saya tak listed di sini?
Doktor,
Yes.
usually the poor communication also lead to the unclear requirements, right?
Yeah, correct. It is correlated. Poor communication. So kadang-kadang communication skill ada satu lagi adalah disebabkan terminology pun satu isu. Okay, I have an experience that dealing with mass comm punya client. So saya awal-awal dia kata, oh dia nak gunakan open source. Bila kita dengar je open source, as a computer science background students, what do you understand by open source?
Free software.
Software kan? Ada lain tak? Ada yang fikir lain tak? Open source. When you talk about open source, dia daripada awal sampai ke sudah open source. Kita nak open source. What do you think? As a computer science student, kita fikir adalah software. Kalau you nak develop, you kena somehow melibatkan open source. Kalau melibatkan open source, you gunakan Java ke, PHP, MySQL, betul? So that is what we think. But luckily, saya jadi confused sikit bila dia cakap macam dah lain sikit, verified with them. Rupanya open source dia adalah open platform opinion maksudnya. Maksud dia nak capture the opinion from all the netizen. Okay, all the netizen yang ada, dia nak capture the information. That's why dia kata dia nak daripada open source. Open source dia rupanya refer to the public opinion. Okay, public opinion. So somehow these kinds of terminology, if you really unsure about it or you ambiguous about it, rasa was-was lah. Better for you to spell out. Better for you to clear it out with your clients. Okay, with your clients. So that you are going to actually didn't do the things that unwanted by your clients. Okay, so these are the things that you have to bear in mind, especially you are talking with different domain of client. Okay, bermaksud kita kena banyak bersabar untuk dengar satu, and then satu lagi kena really clarify if you unclear. Okay, anything to add on? Ya, thank you very much tadi.
Kalau project manager tu short sendiri buat sistem tu, kira masuk dekat mana tu?
Okay, kalau dia short sendiri tu, okay, yang kedua tu kategori tu, ego. Jenis yang ego, dia rasa dia competence tau. Dia rasa dia ego, competence. Dia tak ambil kisah kepada cakap orang lain. Team members kata tak boleh ni, bos tak boleh buat ni. Tapi dia ego, boleh je, boleh, tak ada masalah. Klien kita akan suka ni, tak ada masalah. So it's the egoism. So bermaksud dia ego, dia rasa dia competence enough. Okay, competence enough. This kinds of project manager. Saya pernah jumpa juga this kinds of project manager. Dia semua kena patuh kepada dia. Okay, semua kena patuh kepada dia. Dia rasa macam it is good, it is right, it is good for our clients and so on. So dia dalam kategori tu ego. Okay, menjadikan project failure tu lah ego. Okay, thank you for the feedback. Okay, let us continue. Okay, thank you for all the feedback yang ada. Right, so when we talk about requirement engineering, it's actually a process. Okay, establish kita sebagai project managers ataupun somehow involved in the project team, kita hanya fokus kepada service that the customers requires. However, kita tak terlupa satu benda yang penting, that is the constraints. Apa yang kita tak mampu tu from the system, we have to spell out actually. Okay, so beside from the client needs or customers requirement from the system, actually spend some time to look at the constraints under the systems after the system operate or when it's developed. Okay, you have to highlight it. Okay, you have to highlight it to the clients. You have to highlight it from time to time juga. Beritahu sistem ni boleh buat setakat ni dan apa yang constraint dia. Okay, somehow kita disebabkan rasa macam tak nak beritahu clients because of some mandatory issue. Disebabkan duit takut klien kata kenapa tak boleh buat? Alah, you orang ni kenapa tak boleh kata ni dan sebagainya. But somehow you have to face the truth or face the facts that system have the limitations. Sometimes it's not because of we cannot do it, but because of the constraint of the money and the budget. Let the client know that, kalau you nak tambah yang ni boleh je, kita orang tak ada masalah. In terms of duit, tambah lah. That is the tips I want to give it to you. Kadang-kadang klien kata, benda ni takkanlah tak boleh buat. Oh boleh, tak ada masalah. Kena tambah duit lah. Maksud, kalau you tambah satu benda ni, function ni, development team kat belakang tu kena tambah more time in order actually to code it, okay, to code it, to integrate it, to test it as a system unit and so on. So that's why you can actually spell out the constraint. Okay, spell out constraint. That is the things that we overlook at it. Okay, so overall, the main purpose, of requirements engineering actually is to produce a product that capture the most important characteristic needed by the client. That means when client wants to develop something, and you actually really have to actually capture the most important characteristic of the system. And don't put in any non or we call it unwanted characteristic. So kalau tak perlu tak payah letak. Okay? Menjadikan satu sistem tu macam terlampau banyak benda yang tak diperlukan. Okay, so the most important when you produce something that is owned by your clients, that means your client love it. Your client say it's good. It's you capture all the things that the client needs, and you are actually get rid of avoiding from all the unwanted. Jadikan satu software tu orang kata simple and clear. And most of the things high benefit compared to the competitors' products. That's why as a project manager, kalau you ada peluang jadi project manager to any freelance products or any of the project in the company, spare some time to Google about your competitors' product. Let's say your clients want to build something that similar to booking.com. Okay, similar to booking.com. Spend some time to look at booking.com ke, Expedia ke, Traveloka ke. Tengok macam mana dia orang layoutkan, apa yang diperlukan dalam function website tersebut. So try to look at the competitors' website in order to get the most important characteristic of the system that needed by your client. Of course, it needs your efforts. Okay, it needs your efforts and initiative to go and check on the competitors' products and give a beneficial feedback to your client. Okay, so and the last one is the most important one. No matter how good if your requirements and so on, you have to efficiently develop it. You boleh janjikan bintang dengan bulan software saya boleh buat ni, software saya boleh buat ni, tim saya boleh buat ni. But at the end, when you declare it as a successful of the software product, it is efficiently developed and can deliver to your client on time. Okay, that will be the success for a software engineer and for the whole products. Okay, so that is a main goal of it. Okay, it's a main goal for the requirement engineering. So basically, when we talk about until now, what is actually requirement ni? Maybe some of you might ask yourself, okay, apa tu requirement sebenarnya? daripada awal cakap requirement engineering. Apa tu requirement? Okay, requirement can be a very high level abstract statement. User hanya beritahu, saya nak satu website yang boleh bandingkan semua holiday package. So tolong buat sistem macam tu. The very high level abstract statement. Or to a very detailed mathematical functional. Okay. Pernah dia dengan satu farmasi punya klien. Dia bagi some formula. Bila kaji balik formula tu, rupanya formula tu adalah related to mathematics linear algebra. Kena buka balik buku linear algebra tu, nak buat regression lah, nak buat semua, saya kena buka balik. Disebabkan nak fahamkan dia punya linear algebra dia. So it's a very detailed mathematical function. So can be very abstract, can be very technical. So it depends on your client. Some of the client they say that okay, actually kalau bagi yang high level abstract punya client, actually the clients need your help actually to spell out all the detailed parts of the statement. So because he or she might not very clear on what he really wants and so on. But for the clients that are in the very technical fields, macam contoh doctors macam contoh yang saya tadi kata farmasi tu. From that point of view, the most important is the calculation. Macam mana you nak calculate satu drugs to the dosage of it, what will be the interval for you to have oral infusion dan sebagainya. So ayat-ayat dari keluar tu terpaksa kita orang catat, record dan sebagainya, and then kita check balik, Google balik apa tu infusion. So oral fusion, apa yang infusion, lepas tu ada bio equivalence, benda-benda yang technical terms. We have to actually really know, understand and read it. Okay, we spend some time, rasanya sikit masa lagi saya dah jadi boleh belongs to faculty pharmacy dah. Okay, disebabkan semua libatkan drugs name and so on. Okay, so the requirement can be varied. So what will be the requirements due for is for the bidding. Okay, it's a basic for the bidding. Okay, it's a basic for the bidding. Ada tak siapa-siapa pernah bid project ataupun bid contract? Pernah tak? Ada orang? Ada experience? Bid product. Maksud ada contract. Ya? Pernah?
Pernah doktor?
Oh, okay. Cerita sikit. Apa yang perlu dalam, you akan buat high level abstract ke detail mathematical tu? For the bid.
We need to know what
When you bidding.
business is.
Okay. So business case.
Something like that lah.
The basic process.
Yes.
Paling penting adalah by the business process.
Last time we are bidding for the I-Guaman system for the lawyers. So we need to know the process of the court itself.
Paling penting adalah business process. Okay, paling penting adalah business process. Good. Okay, betul. Saya pernah bid untuk projek tapi tak berjaya lah. Dia pernah bid satu projek tapi tak berjaya. So masa dalam kontrak untuk bidding kontrak, paling penting adalah untuk satu business processes. Maksud you kena tahu you punya client punya business process, do some research, do some study, so that you can capture the we call it the most important characteristic of the system in order to bid that project. Okay, but make sure that it's doable. Okay, make sure that it's doable. Then harga dia berpatutan. Jangan sky high punya harga yang memang you takkan dapat. So experience saya bid ada 3 projek. 2 projek tak berjaya bid, 1 projek berjaya bid. Di mana kita kalahkan universiti lain dengan industri. Ada berapa industri punya bid. So kita rapat masa dalam software testing untuk testing. testing for a system. Okay, so it can be a basic for the contract itself, and it can be actually detailed out a little bit because you want to calculate that kinds of cost, apa yang diperlukan. So when we talk about types of requirements early, this is our first learning outcome. Actually, we can divide it into two types. One is a user requirement, one is a system requirement. When we talk about user requirement, it's actually written for user. Nama dia pun user requirement. It's written for the user. So when you return the requirement for the user to read, make sure that you use simple English. Okay, you use simple English, natural language that you use, and support with some simple diagram for them to understand. Okay, my experience is actually you can add to some use case diagram. Okay, so that and when you explain it, the clients so-called can understand it better. They can understand it better in order to capture the needs, the requirement from the user. And when you want to verify, ask them to verify and so on, make sure that the sentence is quite easy and they can understand it. It's not that technical, avoid from jargon and so on, so that they can verify the needs, the requirement. Okay. So the other side is actually a system requirement. When we talk about system requirement, it's actually between you, the client, and within the contractor, that is the software development team. Okay, in order to spell it out for the software development team, so we need some system requirement. System requirement is very structured document setting out all the detailed parts of the function, service that provided, functionality that provided by the system, and also what will be the constraints of it. Okay, or constraint of the system. So some examples of it. Some example, if the first paragraph is actually for the user requirement. Okay, this is a system we call it Mental Health Care Patient Management System, MHC, Mental Health Care Patient Management System. Okay, it's a patient management system. So as an example of it, okay, the system shall generate monthly management report showing the cost of drugs prescribed by each clinic during that month. This is actually very simple natural language, very simple requirement, user requirement that most of the user can understand. Maksud dia kat sini, sistem tu boleh keluarkan satu management report secara bulanan untuk setiap klinik. Okay? So, tapi kalau user requirement ni sampai ke development team, dia mula pening lah. Kalau ayat tu sampai, user requirement tu sampai ke development team, dia mula pening. Monthly, apa yang management report dia perlukan? Okay. Lepas tu, apabila apa yang perlu dalam drugs tersebut, apa unit yang diperlukan untuk drugs tersebut. Okay. And then, you nak report jenis macam mana? Nak perlukan drugs name ke? Ataupun berapa jenis drug yang dijual ke? Ataupun macam mana? That will be a lot of we call it unclear statements if you base on the user requirement and you give it to the development team. So that's why we have to elaborate it. We have to actually put it into quite technical, into the system requirement specification before you pass it to the development team. Okay, so this is an example. So from the user requirement, we are going to refine it into system requirement. First, 1.1, on the last working day of each month, a summary of the drugs prescribed, costs, and the clinic shall be generated on the last working day. So ini pun dalam technical programmers ni kena faham lah, because each month will be different. Ada yang 30, ada yang 31, ada yang 28, ada certain year jadi 29 dan sebagainya. So they have to cater in terms of technically programming. That's why kita belajar coding tu. Belajar coding tu. Coding tu siapa buat? Degree level, diploma level dia buat. Tak make sure that dia belajar betul-betul lah. Kalau tak dia buat sistem salah. Okay, buat sistem salah. So that's why last working day pun ada satu, kalau nak go into very technical, that will be the development part. Dia tahu. Okay, dia sepatutnya tahu. Kerana dia dah melalui dah Kalau dia ambil diploma is computer science, degree in computer science, dia sepatutnya dah tahu lah. Kalau sebut je last working day of the month, dia kena ada few things yang dia kena check on. Okay. The system shall automatically generate the report for printing after 5:30. Okay, 5:30 on the last working day of the month. 5:30 je boleh generate report dah. Maksud dia ambil report daripada dia punya table mana dan sebagainya. A report shall be created for each clinic. Maksud kalau dia ada 10 klinik, 10 lah. Kalau dia ada branches adalah 5 lah. Okay, shall list all the individual drugs name, the numbers of prescriptions, dosage and the total cost. So this is the things that needed. Okay. Kena spell out for the team to know what to generate. Kalau you kata satu management report je, banyak benda tu, dia tak tahu nak apa nak highlight dan sebagainya. So if the drugs are available in different dose units, bermaksud ada 10 gram, 20 gram, 30 gram dan sebagainya, separate report will be generated. So that is a technical part. Okay, that is actually difference between the user requirement using a very simple English and is written for the clients and customers. And the system requirements actually, okay, this is the summary of it. The readers different, okay. When we talk about the user requirement, the most important readers here is a client manager. Okay, client manager whoever deal with you, okay, as a verifications, representative from the company and so on. The system end user, if you deal with the system end users and so on. For the system requirement, okay, so the focus readers will be very important for the system architecture, for the system architect to know. The client engineer have to know because they want to verify of it, whether we are deliver the things that needed by them or not. And most important thing is our software developers. They are going to according to whatever the system requirement in order to build up the system. Okay, any questions? The difference between user and the system requirement, is that clear? Boleh? Until now quite simple, right? Boleh, alright, thank you. So, actually this is actually, we go into, just now we say we have functional, regardless the user requirement ataupun system requirement, dia boleh divided into two main types lagi. Okay? Sama ada functional, non-functional, satu lagi adalah domain requirements ataupun constraints. Okay? So we have three main types of it. Okay? Regardless of the user or the system requirement. So when we talk about functional, so functional just like name function. Okay? Function. The statements of service the system should provide. Maksud what are the functionalities of the system? Apa sistem boleh buat sebenarnya? Apa sistem yang boleh bagi servis? Okay? So you have to actually step down what the system should do and what the system should not do. Limitation of it lah. So functionality, functional requirements capture all the functional requirement, the services that should be provided by the system. Okay? Contoh kalau you kata you nak develop satu yang tadi itu kata kan, melibatkan nak buat something macam booking.com tapi more kepada holiday package and so on. So what will be the function yang ada? Kalau dia adalah satu website melibatkan holiday package, then what will be the functions that should be inside? Kita bagi contoh. Boleh tak functional? Kita bagi case tadi, contoh saya nak develop something related seolah macam booking.com. Okay, booking.com.
Dia login.
Semua pergi travelling kan? Okay, kena ada login. Okay, lagi functional. Soalan-soalan macam ni akan keluar. Soalan-soalan macam ni akan keluar. Suruh dia list out functional, non-functional. Tadi bagi senario dia.
Delay tu dah ada orang reserve atau belum?
Macam mana?
The room has been booked or not?
Okay, so that means it's allowed. paling penting the basic one, the basic one, if you want to create something like booking.com and so on, booking.com ke, Expedia ke, Traveloka ke, the most important is you have to search for types of service. Bermaksud you nak booking untuk bilik ataupun location kat mana, selections of dates, check in bila, check out bila, before you check for the ability of the room and so on, correct?
Most important is whether
That is actually
the room is reserved or not, doctor.
Okay, the room is being reserved or not and so on, that would be functional. Okay, we call it functional. Meaning that what are the service, what are the functionality needed by that website. We call it functional. Okay, we call it functional. What about non-functional? Non-functional actually is more on the add-on service through the system, like in between the timing, the efficiency, the performance, and so on. Okay. Back to the examples of website. Okay, website yang macam booking.com tu, what will be the non-functional yang ada?
The design, doctor.
The user interface. Okay, kita namakan usability. The user interface, how the client is going to use it. How your end user, bukan client lagi. Client adalah orang yang bayar untuk you buat, but the end user. Okay, how the end user feel about the user interface. We call it usability lah. Usability. That's why ada certain company dia nak emphasize on the usability testing. Okay, that is non-functional. Okay, that is non-functional in terms of products. That is non-functional in terms of product. Okay, good. So that means actually the interface of it. Interface of it, cara macam mana, layout dia, most important ke atas, yang lain layout kat belakang, kat bawah macam mana dan sebagainya. So that is actually non-functional. In the product, non-functional. Okay. So when we talked about domain, as I mentioned to you earlier, domain requirement basically come from the experts. Okay. So if you deal with the medical personnel, so we're going to actually take some knowledge from them. If you're dealing with a trend, okay, macam saya pernah project dengan rail station, so daripada station yang kereta api dan sebagainya, KTM, under KTM, so dia punya requirements yang lain dan sebagainya. So we have to really learn, okay, we have to really capture the requirement from the expert. Again, requirement for the expert. Okay, so when we talk about the functional, can be subdivided into three. That is functionality. Yeah, as I mentioned to you, functionality. What type of functions that needed? What type of web services that needed? Okay, what types of actually the detailed process of it. Okay, and it can actually the business rules. The processes. Selepas dia dah booking, selepas tu bagaimana? Okay, lepas dia dah check availability, then apabila macam tu, proses dia macam mana? The business rules of it, the process of it, we have to understand. Okay, it is actually type of the functional. Okay, that is a functional. So in terms of interface here, okay, interface here is in terms of how you're going to tackle, like for example, calendar. Okay, you not select what will be the right things, for you to capture the calendar. Check in, check out. Ada tak klik terus keluar calendar, ataupun user boleh flick through the calendar ataupun macam mana. So that will be the functionals of that interface or buttons and something. So beside from the functionals here, we have the behaviors. Okay, what will be the behaviors of the system? Okay, what will be the states? Bermaksud daripada sini dia pass kepada mana, especially for the embedded system, okay, embedded software and so on. And we have to cater for the error handling. We call it exception flow. Okay, exception flow, that means if something go wrong, klik, apa yang akan jadi for the data overflow and so on. What will be the error handling? Okay, what will be the error handling? So let's say you want the user to key in by number, tapi user accidentally press on something, alphabets and so on. It might, you have to test it. Okay, you have to test it, the system thoroughly, so that the system will not display some going to actually happen some errors. Okay, kalau dapat detect je, okay, adalah alphanumeric dan sebagainya, dia bagi satu message, bagi satu notification to the user highlighting what goes wrong, ask the user to correct it. That is actually functional. Jatuh dalam error handling. So error handling for the certain inputs, we validate the second inputs and so on, certain inputs, important input. And then category inside the functional requirement is the data structs. Okay, saya rasa semua dah belajar tata struct kan? Masa degree semua dah belajar data struct kan? What do you understand by data struct?
Database design.
Huh?
The database design.
The database design, okay, is the organizations of the data, the management, the organizations of the data, so that it can facilitate the access of the data in order to retrieve it, in order to have some indexing, in order to have some display from the database. We can use relational database, okay, object-oriented database and so on. So kita kena tahulah data structure yang macam mana. Okay, data structure yang macam mana lebih sesuai untuk sesuatu sistem supaya dia boleh access and retrieve the data easily. So efficiency of the data retrieve, data display from the database and so on. So that will be the data structs. It's actually under the category of functionality. Okay, functions requirement, functional requirements. Anything to add on yang lain? Untuk functional?
Doktor nak
Ataupun
tanya.
ada apa-apa soalan tak?
Untuk
Yes.
mobile development under functional or non-functional, Doktor?
Mobile development, dia ada.
Mobile development design.
Kalau you kata mobile,
Ya, mobile interface.
dia mobile interface. Kalau katakan dia more kepada interface ni adalah kalau boleh jatuh, dia boleh jatuh kepada kategori non-functional, boleh jatuh kepada kategori functional. When you talk about the mobile interface the interface yang ada, let's say dia adalah dalam kategori yang melibatkan you want to develop it into the responsive web, let's say. Okay, responsive web that cater for different kinds of mobile devices and so on. Okay, mobile devices and so on. You have to categorize it into functional because you have to know, your team have to know that it's really important for you to design something that is suitable for the client with different types of mobile devices. Kalau tak, contohlah mobile development. Kalau dia kata dia tak berapa yang user, let's say your team tak tahu apa requirements of the users and so on, dia akan develop something that is not responsive enough. So apabila klien gunakan handphone dia dan sebagainya ataupun mobile device dia terpaksa enlargekan untuk baca sebagainya. But if you let your development team know that, okay, klien nak adalah dalam responsive web. So apabila macam tu, dia kena design, gunakan CSS, dia gunakan design certain things yang melibatkan responsive web design. Apabila responsive web design, dia akan jatuh dalam kategori yang functional disebabkan dia kena tahu, you kena embedded dalam template CSS supaya dia boleh adjust according to the screen size of the mobile devices yang ada. Okay, that's why kalau katakan interface yang melibatkan macam tu, dia more kepada functional. Tapi apabila you melibatkan non-functional, contoh je grafik dari ataupun usability, okay, usability of the system, button ni kena look like apa, kalender ni kena macam mana, lebih sesuai dan sebagainya, akan jatuh kategori non-functional. Nanti kita akan go into detail untuk non-functional. Okay, any other questions? Kalau ada soalan tu tanya, jangan senyap je. Kalau ada soalan tu tanya. Right. Okay, this is some examples of the functional requirement. This is some example for the mental health care patient management system. Okay, contohnya, as user shall be able to search the appointment list for all clinics. The system shall generate each day for the clinic a list of patients. Okay, and each staff members using the system shall be uniquely identified by his or her 8-digit employee number. So these are three statements, we call it functional requirement. Adalah melibatkan function of the system. Okay. However, there are some issues here. We call it requirement imprecision. That means ambiguous requirement. Okay. It needs you to find out actually what type of search needed here. Can you give a suggestion? A requirement, a user shall be able to search. Kalau benda ni sampai kat you akan interpret macam mana? You akan buat search macam mana? A user shall be able to search the appointment list for all clinics.
Type of sickness, what type of illness that the patient have.
Type of illness You kata type of illness. Okay, yang lain?
Assign doctor.
Doctors Bagi ke doctors. Okay, lagi? A user shall be able to search the appointment list for all clinics. You akan buat macam mana kalau dapat
Search for the specialist.
Search for the specialist. Maksud dia akan gunakan apa? Dia ikut nama specialist.
Like orthopedic specialist or something like that lah.
Okay, pemasuk klien tu kena masukkan apa? Masukkan specialist lah. Dia nak search.
Just a drop down list to refine what they want, what type of illness they have.
Okay.
Just choose it, and the list will the system will list out the available clinics.
Okay, available clinics. Okay, that is your interpretations. Yang lain? Bagi satu lagi. Bila you baca, apa yang you akan buat?
Date.
Tak ada idea. Date. Okay. Katakan search by date Search by date. Okay. Right. So, we have three opinions. Yang lain tu mungkin ada opinions lain lagi. For this kinds of statements, we call it requirement imprecision. So meaning that is the challenge during the requirements. So we cannot capture sometimes when you write down a functional requirement, in these kinds of scenario, is an ambiguous requirement. Bermaksud requirement yang ada was-was. Maksud we don't know what really needed by the client. So the most important things here, you have to react. Try to ask your client what they want to search. Maybe adalah a user shall be able to search the appointment list for all clinics. Bermaksud dia hanya tahu, masukkan nama dia search dia kat klinik mana ada appointment. Okay, kerana patient dia adalah patient yang mental health. Ada masalah mental ni, patient dia. So dia kemungkinan dia tak ingat pun dia dah pernah buat appointment mana semua, dia ingat nama dia je. So maybe dia perlukan letak nama dia, letak IC dia ke apa, dia search directly, dia dah keluar appointment dia kat mana, hari apa, kat klinik mana. Okay, so maybe that is what the client needs. So that's why these kinds of statement we call it ambiguous requirement. Requirement that need verification from the user or from your clients, because different developers, different people will interpret it differently. Okay, so that is challenge. One of the challenge when when you gather the requirements. So a good requirements actually both have to be complete and consistent. Honestly, until now, okay, I can guarantee you, in practice, it is impossible for you to have a complete and consistent requirements document. Honestly, honestly. Ideal to have, okay, is good to have. However, it's really it's really hard for you to have the completeness and the consistency of the requirements. Memang agak sukar lah because of the change requests, okay? Because of the client needs, because we deal with the clients from time to time, they were going to add on, okay, for the requirements. So, now we finish with the functional. Functional, kita tahu dah, functional adalah more kepada functionality, kena tahu business rules, business processes, dan yang kita tahu adalah dia punya dia punya interfaces and so on. So now when we talk about non-functional, actually can be subdivided into three main categories for the non-functional. Non-functional in terms of the product, non-functional in terms of organization's rules and so on, and non-functional in terms of the external requirements and so on. So when we talk about non-functional, is deal with the system properties, is deal with the system constraints of it. Okay, so kita ada bahagikan tiga jenis yang besar. It is a big picture. It is a big picture about the non-requirements, non-functional requirements. Okay, divided product requirements is a requirement that specify the product must behave in certain or particular way. Okay, so the product requirements here, ini adalah contoh-contoh yang ada. Satu adalah usability tadi tu. Usability requirement is a non-functional requirement under the category of product. Okay. Another one is efficiency. Sama ada performance kalau melibatkan network. The web traffic and so on. Contoh yang ada tu future. Dalam weekday is going to actually having a performance issue. A lot of people log in, students log in order to capture the attendance, in order to get the notes, in order to do some exercise online and so on. So although future already park it in the cloud, they are cloud service. However, still face a performance issue. Okay, performance issue in terms of the web traffic. Okay, and then we have another one. We call it dependability. Maybe you are not familiar with dependability. However, when you break into dependability, look inside it. It's related to the reliability. How reliable the system, especially for the, let's say, the system of surgery. You can have reliability. You have doctors have to depend on the system in order to do some surgery and so on. So the reliability of the product is a non-functional requirement, but it is important. Nak potong mana masuk alat dalam perut, doktor hanya potong kat luar, tapi yang dalam tu dia hanya ada satu benda, dia potong kat luar, tapi dalam tu dah ada pisau untuk potong dan sebagainya. It's a reliability kalau melibatkan surgery. Okay. Website, kalau website you type asyik loading dan sebagainya, ataupun service is not in service, error 404, you akan fade out. So that kind we call it availability. Dalam dependability dia ada satu lagi sub, nama dia available, especially for the system website that provide services. Services website produce should be 24/7. Jangan ada down. Contoh lagi adalah online banking. Online banking really emphasizing on availability. Should be 24/7 available. Okay, available for your clients to do online transactions and so on. So that is actually on the category of dependability. Okay, dependability. That means you can depend on the system to do something. It's reliable to do the surgery. Let's say it's available 24/7 to do the online banking. Okay, that is the category of non-functional. Okay, and another example is a security requirement. So security requirement, I put this asterisk here. Okay, sometimes security requirements can be functional. Why? Just now, saya rasa Nazim yang cakap kot. Nazim yang cakap yang tentang login tu. Siapa yang cakap tentang login?
Ya, doktor, saya cakap.
Login, log out. Okay, log in, log out. Dalam kategori yang log in, log out, dia akan jatuh kategori untuk we call it functional. Okay, we call it functional. Tapi adalah security requirement. Dia akan jatuh dalam kategori functional. That means you have to add that function untuk membolehkan user log in, user log out. But what is the security requirements here? Maybe security requirements here is because of certain, like for example, example kalau you kata melibatkan security requirements yang let's say section management, let's say section management perlu kena ada somehow control on the session, okay, control on the session and so on. So that is a non-functional, okay, non-functional, but you have to do it, okay, you have to do it, you have to embed it to the system if the system is quite sensitive to the transactions and so on. Back button tak boleh guna, let's say. Kalau you kata especially transaction, you tak boleh back button. Back buttonnya ada something wrong and so on. So you should be enable the back button for the users. Jangan click back button and so on. So that is a security requirements that needed to cater. Okay, needed to cater in terms of non-functional. So that is a product requirement on the non-functional. So it's actually on the what the system or the product should behave. Okay, should behave according to the needs of the client. Okay, so in terms of the organisation, okay, ada product requirement, ada nak tambah ke? Ada experience yang nak share ke tentang product requirement? Contoh, nak bagi contoh ke apa ke? Ada ke?
Doktor,
Yes.
ada tak yang bahagian security requirement tu saya ada blur sikit part. Dia boleh jadi functional tapi boleh jadi non-functional.
Correct. Dia boleh jadi functional, boleh jadi non-functional. As I mentioned to you, disebabkan log in, log out. Log in, log out, you akan jadikan satu function. Maksud benda yang functionality tu. Functionality bermaksud you kena create untuk log in. So and then bila log in kena checking untuk log in, verified username and so on. You kena buat untuk adalah reset password. Benda tu akan jadi functional. Maksud you kena ada satu requirement, jadikan dia functional. But ada certain things tu melibatkan, contohlah user kadang-kadang dia tak spell out dia punya non-functional requirement. Contoh non-functional requirement, for example, let's say yang saya cakap tadi tu, ada certain things yang back button tak boleh, kita kena enablekan back button. Ataupun kita kena add in certain things like the session management dan sebagainya. So benda-benda macam ni kadang-kadang user dia kata dia nak, contoh macam online banking lah, online banking. Okay, dia nak katakan satu transaction, kalau satu benda tu stay for let's say 5 seconds, you kena automatically log out and so on. So somehow this is actually the security requirement for the product. Depends on the product. Kalau produk lain, contoh kalau saya buat adalah tentang curriculum, saya perlukan masa lama nak tengok dokumen, nak letak dan sebagainya. That kinds of system, kita tak perlukan somehow yang session management tu. Kita orang tak buat session management tersebut. Contoh sistem yang ada kat UiTM, AIMS. Okay, melibatkan curriculum. Kita kena letak dokumen curriculum, letak dokumen dan sebagainya. Kita tak letakkan dia sebagai session management tu. Bermaksud user masuk, lepas tu dia boleh anytime. So bermaksud dia boleh 1 jam, 2 jam sistem open kat situ. Kalau you tiba-tiba tutup, letak balik dia kan On down page 2 juga, bermaksud kita tak buat session management tersebut. Because it's not not required for that. Okay, that is actually the non-functional requirement. So I agree that security requirements tu dia akan jadi macam blur sikit. Somehow you can treat it as a functional and you can treat it as a non-functional. Okay, so I agree with that untuk security requirements. Okay, so let's move on to the organization requirement in terms of non-functional. So this is a requirement which are a consequences of the organization policy. Organization policy, certain policy dia setkan environmental requirement, operational requirement dengan development requirement. So certain company like for example tadi tu mental health care, dia kata dia kena log in by using @PGIC employee numbers and so on. That is the operational requirement. Dia perlukan users using the @PGIC employee numbers in order to log in and so on. That will be the operational requirement needed by the products. Okay, kita kena set lah. Maksud kita kena tahu itu adalah operational product, is a non-functional product. Okay, non-functional requirement required by the organization. Okay, required by the organization. And then certain development requirement, let's say the in-house, dia familiar dengan PHP, dengan MySQL. Dia akan beritahu, tolong develop dalam PHP dengan MySQL disebabkan my personnel yang lepas ni nak in charge adalah dia memang mahir dalam PHP dengan MySQL dia. Contoh macam yang saya dengar dia dengan hospital. Hospital dia kata dia required, kalau saya nak buat mobile apps dia, tolong buat dalam Flutter. Dia tak nak kita buat dalam Ionic framework dan sebagainya, dia nak dalam Flutter. Dia dah spell out. That will be the development requirements. So that means if we want to develop a mobile apps for that client, they already spell out. Our in-house team familiar dengan Flutter ataupun in-house punya mobile application adalah dalam bentuk dalam platform Flutter. Gunakan language Flutter. That's why dia nak saya develop mobile application tersebut pun dalam modul tu, pun dalam Flutter supaya dia boleh integrate. That will be the development requirement. Environmental requirements is related to the environmental needs for the system. In terms of location-wise, okay, in terms of what will be the environment needs for that client, okay. Bermaksud dia dalam keadaan yang macam mana, okay, keadaan yang macam mana dia nak guna pakai sistem tersebut, and we have to actually go into that is the examples of the non-functional requirement. Okay, any questions?
Doktor, ni termasuk local or language ke doktor?
Apa dia?
Termasuk local language ke?
Local language maksud dia? Yes. Local language. Bermaksud dia punya bahasa yang digunakan lah. Contoh ada certain agensi kerajaan, ada certain agensi kerajaan. Contohlah saya pernah dia dengan polytechnic. Dia nak suruh kita orang buat sistem tapi dia nak guna bahasa Melayu. Itu memang cukup susah lah. So kita dah biasa gunakan English, bukan English kita terror. But klien tu suruh buat sistem tu dalam bahasa English, bahasa Melayu. Macam kita nak input something kan, nama, kita biasa gunakan name, nombor pekerja kan, employee ID dia nak suruh nombor pekerja. So itu adalah local lah, good example, yes, good example. Organization requirement, that is the category of the organization requirement. Okay, environmental requirements and so on. Okay, environmental requirement, aku boleh kategori dalam environmental requirement. Okay, good feedback. Ada apa tak lagi? Ada nak bagi contoh ke? Ada apa nak clarify untuk organisation? Okay, tak ada. Okay, the last one in the non-functional requirement is related to the external requirement. External requirements here is the requirement that from outside for the system, outside of the system, but we have to we have to actually abide to it. Okay, let's say just now mental health care is involve privacy. Okay, bermaksud hanya doktor saja boleh baca patient punya detail. Okay, patient punya detail about the student the data of the patients and so on. That is we call it ethical requirement, ethics of it. Only certain people can actually access to the system, and we actually cannot review the privacy of the data of the patients, regardless the patients punya consider the patient's illness, conditions, and so on. So that is ethic requirements. Okay. So and then other jenis legislative requirement, like for example untuk accounting, accounting contoh melibatkan certain like the SST, the GST, and so on. Okay. And then somehow ini adalah somehow melibatkan, let's say, melibatkan weapon. Okay, let's say melibatkan weapon, melibatkan military systems and so on. There are certain safety dengan security requirement there, and it's fine with the legal. Okay, it's fine with the legal. So, okay. So anything to add on? Okay, overall, the non-functional requirement might affect the overall architecture of the system. Okay, overall as the system, for example, the performance requirements and so on. Okay, a single non-functional requirement, let's say a security, will generate a numbers of related functional requirement. That's why saya kata ada certain questions. Security requirement. Okay, kadang-kadang I admit that. Okay, I admit that. Untuk security requirement. Kerana you boleh nampak security requirement boleh jatuh dalam kategori functional, boleh jatuh dalam kategori non-functional, and then boleh jatuh dalam kategori yang untuk legislative requirement. Okay, so it depends. It depends on how client and what is the product that you want to develop. Okay. So any questions related to the non-functional? Ada benda nak share ke ataupun add on? Benda siapa-siapa buat tak untuk usability testing tu? Ada benda terlibat tak usability testing? Tak pernah Tak ada lagi. Alright. Okay, so this is an example. This is an example of non-functional in terms of the product. Okay, let us look at the first one. The system shall be available to all clinics during normal working hours. Downtime within normal working hours shall not exceed 5 in any one day. Dia jatuh dalam kategori mana dalam product requirement? Baca sekali lagi. The system shall be available for all the clinic during the normal working hour. Downtime within the normal working hour shall not exceed 5 seconds. Okay. Dia dalam kategori mana? Dalam product requirement.
Functional kot doktor.
Downtime tu available for
Product requirement.
certain time in the working day.
Product requirements.
Betul, memang product requirement.
Usability requirement
Dalam
doktor.
product requirement kategori mana?
Dependability.
Dependability. Yes. Dependability. As I mentioned just now, dependability can be subdivided into few types. Kita ada reliability, ada availability dan sebagainya. That's why adalah dependability requirement. Good. Okay, let's look at the next one. Organizational requirement. Users of the system shall authenticate themselves using their health authority identity card. Okay, baca sekali lagi. The user of the system shall authenticate themselves using the health authority identity card. Adalah dalam organizational requirement. Okay, which category inside the organization requirement? Yang lain setuju? Yes, is an operational requirement. Okay, is an operational requirement. In that kinds of things, operational requirement, sometimes kita kena tahu dia gunakan card. Jadi apa yang diperlukan? Bermaksud dia perlukan card reader. Okay, bermaksud dia perlukan card reader. Okay, kat sini. Okay, hardware dia. Bermaksud dia gunakan authority identity card. Maksud dia perlukan hardware kat sini adalah card reader. Sama ada card reader jenis yang touch ataupun card reader jenis yang macam mana. Okay, that's why dia perlukan satu card reader. Card reader untuk hardware dia kat sini. Right. The last one, external requirement. Okay, in the category of external requirement, try to identify. The system shall implement patient privacy provisions are set out in the certain privacy regulation. Okay, so back to here. Dia akan jatuh dalam kategori external requirement for the system. Which category is it?
Regulatory.
Okay, boleh dalam regulatory. Bermaksud dia dalam dia abide dengan certain rule and regulation. Okay, good. Okay, bermaksud dia kena abide dengan certain rule and regulations of it. Okay, dia kena tahu, dia kena kepada privacy provision. Bermaksud dia bila you keluar je website tersebut, dia kena remind kepada doctors, you abide to certain regulations by certain bodies, certain standards. You kena keep the secret of the patient dan sebagainya. Dia kena ada prompt to the user saying that kinds of regulations and so on. Okay, right. This is examples of non-functional requirement. So there are so many metrics actually for the non-functional requirement. When we talk about speed, when you want to measure, you can measure in terms of transaction per second. Contoh macam mana? Contoh macam search engine. Okay, search engine. Search engine, you letak je satu keyword, dia search, dia akan return by berapa millisecond. Millisecond dia return by the result. Okay, that's why search engine, you nak tahu dia punya non-functional requirement adalah dia punya search. Okay, search result return, dia punya response time. Okay, response time dia. Okay, once you key in the keywords, dia akan beritahu search result in berapa second. Itu adalah non-functional requirement by any search engine. Okay, itu sebagai satu measure dia. Orang kata measure dia. Okay. So in terms of the size, okay, in terms of the ease of use. Ease of use here is a category of usability lah. Okay, this category of usability. Ease of use here, when we say that, okay, the system is easy to use. How you measure it? How you measure a system is easy to use. Binding a user in 1 day ataupun 8 hours, the user shall able to operate the system without any failure. Contoh itu adalah training time. Bermaksud kita measure dia ease of use by training time 4 hours ke 6 hours ke, the user can able to operate the system without any error. Okay, contoh. Ataupun the numbers of the help friends. Okay, easy to use, bermaksud dia ada information. Okay, easy to use, you classify easy to use because you provide some bubbles, ada bubbles and information. Okay, you classify it as easy to use in terms of usability requirement. Benda ni kadang-kadang contoh melibatkan farmasi tu dia perlukan benda ni. Disebabkan kadang-kadang dosage, dosage tu dia nak beritahu adalah miligram ataupun dia nak beritahu berapa gram dan sebagainya dosage tu. So bermaksud dia perlukan kita orang buat bubble. Benda tu adalah kategori non-functional requirement. Okay? Reliability, just now we say that, okay, the mean time to failure, okay, is a reliability. Availability, okay, so the failure occurred and so on, okay. So how many times the website occur a failure, so that is reliability. Robustness, okay, and portability, okay. These are some metrics, and it's not limited to here. This is some example. This is only some examples of it, okay. So, and then the last one for the requirement, aside from the functional, non-functional, we have domain or constraint. Domain here, we have to get the guidelines. Okay, we have to get the guidelines, what to do in certain domain, what is the things that you don't, you have to aware that you don't perform that kinds of functions. And the constraints here in terms of requirements can be deadlines. When is the time for you to deliver the product? What will be the evaluations timelines? What will be the project timelines and so on? Is there any standard that you want to follow? You have to follow. Okay, contoh kalau melibatkan banking, dia kena ikut bank negara punya standards and so on. So you have to know that. Kalau melibatkan law firm, dia ada certain standards dia kena follow dan sebagainya. Dalam certain documents dia kena follow. Dalam documents dia ada certain things, policy dan sebagainya dia kena follow. Okay, the most important is the budget as a constraint. Okay, the budget is a constraint. So kadang-kadang as I mentioned to you, the client, if possible, they want to pay a amount of money but getting all the things done. So that's why if you spell out in the bidding, in the contract, ini adalah function, maka ikutkan apa function yang ada tu sebagai satu contract. Later on dia nak tambah, boleh tak? Boleh. Tapi beritahu dalam contract kita adalah spell out berapa function yang ada. That's why sesiapa yang buat freelance ni is a piece of advice. It's a piece of advice. Buat freelance ni dia memang tak cop untuk contract pun. Tak ada yang satu kontrak yang nyata dan sebagainya. But please provide a document for the user to sign off. Walaupun tak formal ni. Maksud saya confirm you tak akan matikan stamp. Once matikan stamp, dan maksud you declare you punya income dan sebagainya. Nanti you kena bayar income tax dan sebagainya. So, but in order to actually safeguard yourself and draw a boundary of the system. So it's good to have so-called deal or contract. Spell out sistem yang you nak buat ni adalah berapa function yang ada. So discuss betul dan sebagainya. Dia ada satu signature, sign off dengan masa, dengan time tu, dengan tarikh tu. That will become your basis as a informal punya contract. So if your client saying that, saya nak tambah lah you, saya dah bayar 50,000, takkanlah tambah ni, tak boleh dan sebagainya. At least you have some basis to argue, to negotiate, we call it, to negotiate. Okay? So do you agree with me kalau sesiapa yang buat freelance ni? Ada pengalaman buat freelance?
Itu normal, doktor.
Normal Aduh. Lepas tu klien akan beritahu, saya dah bayar 50,000 ataupun lebih lagi lah. Takkanlah tambah ni pun tak boleh. You pun kata, okay lah tambah. Never ending project you. Never ending project. Asyik tambah ni tambah tu, tambah ni tambah tu. So at sometimes actually, walaupun kawan-kawan lah, okay, but you have to put in black and white juga. Okay, black and white as a basic concept. To spell the system should have, and ask them to sign off. Better sign off lah. Saya nak buat. Okay, dia ada sign. Dokumen dia simpan. Beritahu, kita dah agree 50,000 hanya cover ni je. Okay, walaupun kawan-kawan. Alright. So that is my piece of advice. Okay, this is my piece of advice, and sometimes it's useful. Okay, this is what I did. Okay, this is what I did. Because for me, if you didn't make it clear, that will be dragging for your project. You can drag for so long. Okay, so just like never ending story. Keep on tambah. You akan jadi dia punya personal developer. Okay, right, that is my advice. So domain requirement, okay, again domain requirement, I would like to give example tadi tu contoh macam pharmacokinetic system. I have experience of the pharmacokinetic system that come out with all the mathematical formulas as I mentioned to you. Ada yang line graph, ada yang regressions, melibatkan kita kena study balik linear algebra dan sebagainya. So what will be the cut off line and so on. So you have to generate it. We have to understand the user mathematical formula, the domain knowledge of it. Okay, so that we can actually program it according to the client needs and so on. So otherwise, macam ada satu graph tu kita orang stuck lama kat situ. Disebabkan graph tu apabila kita produce dia kata tak betul ni, calculation tak betul, kita terpaksa kena guna formula lain. Bila tahu formula tu tak boleh jalan, kita terpaksa gunakan cara lain untuk breakkan into few calculation untuk capaikan apa yang dia nak untuk accuracy of the graph and so on. Okay, so that is the things that related to the domain requirements and the challenge of it lah. Challenge of it, because somehow your clients you are not in their domain and they are not in your domain. So kadang-kadang kita nak explain, dia tak faham, dia nak explain, kita tak faham. That's why we have to actually have a very good communication. We have to really sit down in technical part of it, okay, so that we can solve the problem, we can actually deliver the product accordingly, okay, accordingly. That's right. So this is the things related to the domain requirements problems, okay, the understandability. That is the things I can tell from my experience. Memang kadang-kadang susah. Okay, kadang-kadang susah disebabkan ayat dia lain, maksud dia kita faham lain, dia faham lain. So that's why really have to sit down with the domain expert. Okay, domain expert. Somehow the domain expert is a specialist, okay, especially doctor. Yeah, especially doctor. When you deal with them, dia rasa benda tu tak perlu explain. Padahal benda tu kita perlu. Contoh kami pernah buat untuk diabetik punya. Dia benda tu adalah note, sesuatu yang bacaan diabetik dan sebagainya. Tapi kita orang tak tahu. Rupanya kena ada sampai satu tahap reading tu kena advise on time insulin dan sebagainya. So benda tu kalau dia tak spell out, kita orang tak tahu. Padahal bagi dia adalah basic knowledge. Supposed to know. But we are not we have that we don't have that knowledge of it. Okay, so it's an implicitness of the knowledge for the expert. Okay, so let's take a break for 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. Let's take 5 minutes. Let's take a break. Students, kita take a break ya.
Okay.
Okay, kita sekarang ni 9.45. Kita balik semula 9.50 kan? 9.50.
Okay.
Right. Okay, right, students. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let us continue. Let's continue. Okay, this is the second part of it. Second part of the topic for today. Okay, second part of the topic. That is for we call it SRS, Software Requirement Specifications Document. Okay, SRS. So SRS actually we have certain format. We have certain format or certain content that you have to include it as a software requirement specifications. Again, for this course is a master's level, we didn't require the students to really write on the SRS. So if you are from the computer science background or computer science students, there is actually a software engineering course in the lower level that is required you to really have a hands-on for the software requirement documentation. It teaches you how to write a requirement, how you level it, and you have to generate a requirement matrix in order for the traceability of the requirement. So meaning that your requirement should be traceable. So each requirement should be bind to the use cases later on and allow to the verify the use cases to verify your requirement. And the requirement matrix is important in checking out all the verifications for the requirement. Okay, so is a software requirements is a first official documents that you have to produce when, especially when you're using a waterfall, okay, or plan-driven development. Okay, in a plan-driven development, it spell out what the system should do. Okay, it's spell out what the system should do. It's not on how, but what. Apa yang sistem tu boleh buat dan perlu buat. Okay. So the user for the SRS documents can be the system customers, okay, to quickly for them to read through the requirement, and it's for chances for them to specify the requirement. And the readers for the managers is really important for the managers, especially for the client side, in order to plan for a bid, okay, plan for the bid and so on. For the system engineer reading the requirement document, it's need the system engineer is really needed in order to understand what the system is to be developed, to identify, especially in terms of the hardware, in terms of the network requirements, in terms especially for the whole control hardware and what will be the software processes and so on. Okay, and then for the system test engineer, for tester, okay, it's important to refer to the SRS in order to generate test cases. So I've been a tester before, so actually we really rely on the system requirement in order to come up with the test cases. If the system requirements, something goes wrong in the system requirement, meaning that they were going to actually have a difficulties for the system tester in order to spell out the test cases and so on. Okay, and especially for the maintenance, okay, the maintenance of the software or the maintenance of the products, it needs a software requirement certification in order to really understand the system and what will be correlationship between the components with the components and between the modules before they can do the maintenance and modification, okay, to improve the system, okay, to improve the system. So that's why SRS is very important to all types of users, okay, to all types of users. So we can use many formats. In UITM, normally we are going to provide our students with the IEEE standards of the document. Okay, in the IEEE standards of the requirement document, these are the some important chapters and sections that we ask our students to write on it. Okay, to write on it. Okay, I will proceed go to the user requirements of definition. In the user requirement definition, this is how you spell out your user requirement. Non-user enough functional.
Doktor, sangkut-sangkut doktor.
Last semester. So we really need our student to spell out the ada numbering dia, okay? Kita kena numberkan IEQ2 and so on. So that, hello? Doktor lain ke?
Sekat-sekat doktor, sekat-sekat.
Sekat-sekat? Alamak. Sekat-sekat pula. Padahal saya tak buat apa-apa. Boleh dengar tak? Tak clear? Is that
Boleh
clear?
sangkut tadi.
Sekarang okey dah?
Okey sekarang. Tapi madam
Sekarang okey dah?
Dia cakap tadi.
Oh, ulang balik. Ulang balik kat mana tu? Kat slide ni. Slide ni.
Ini boleh kot?
Ini boleh.
Okay, saya ulang kat slide ni ya. So basically in the degree level, there will be a hands-on for the user or for the students to have a hands-on writing the SRS. Kita biasalah ajar degree student kita untuk ajar student kita macam mana you nak write SRS. Okay, but the standard that we use is IEEE standard. Okay, IEEE standard asks of the students to write the requirement. Actually, the user requirement. Okay, so that is the main part of it. Okay, and also we teach our students to draw a very simple and understandable high-level architecture, system architecture, so that it can be a deal for the client, to your client to understand it. That you can visualize it, so-called visualize what will be the important components inside the system. Okay, so that the user, the students, so that the client have an overview what will be the system architecture. Okay, so we have system requirement specifications also. Just now we have user requirement specifications. That's why the user will be going to read that part particularly. So the system requirement specifications here is for the development team and the system engineer. We're going to read this part. Here is details about the system requirement specification. What are the things that should set it down here in terms of technical. Okay.
Doktor sangkut balik
Put
doktor.
it here. The most required case. Okay, use case diagram. Okay, use to facilitate. Ayo nanti. Huh? Sangkut lagi ya?
Satu lagi
lagi.
madam.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, doktor, yes.
Yes, doktor.
Bila doktor explain,
Boleh
dia start
okay,
sangkut.
sorry. Okay, kalau explain je tak sangkut, cakap je tak sangkut kan? Alright. Okay, these are the structure. This is the structure for the requirement document. Okay, the most important things about here is actually a process of writing down the user and the system requirement in an official document. Okay, in an official document. The official document is a basic requirement, especially for the plan-driven. Okay, for the plan-driven approach. As I mentioned to you here, okay, some of the software houses right now, especially in Malaysia, they claim that they are using hybrid. Hybrid meaning that they are using two approach at one time. They are using the agile, they are using the waterfall, the plan-driven. So when it's actually is both is a hybrid, that means you have to prepare a very simple document for the reference later on. Okay, but from my experience with the government agency normally asks you to have a very systematic SRS. You kena ada satu format untuk SRS yang structure like this. Okay, especially for the user requirement, system architecture, system requirements, and the system models. Okay, should be in place. This is the basic thing should be in place for the requirement documentations. Okay, right. So in writing the requirements, there are several ways of writing. Okay, the first choice here using natural language. Natural language by number sentence to REQ1 ability for the requirement traceability. That's why it's up to the project managers how they're going to manage the documentation in terms for them to cross-check to verify whether it's being delivered to the client or not. Okay, it's up to the project manager. It's good that one sentence only one requirement. Easier for you to cross-check to verify whether it's delivered or not. Okay. Secondly, is written in a structure. Structured here is a format of the tag form. Kita ada satu standard, some natural language in the tabulate form. Okay, this is another way for you to write the requirement. The third way here is using the design description language. Okay, this description language. But this approach is actually quite seldom using it because it's more useful for the interface specification. Okay, that means you have to specify what will be the interface and so on. Okay, so the most useful right now and more practically more practical is graphical notation. When we talk about graphical notations, we use case diagram, sequence diagram, activity diagram, state diagram in order to explain in order to represent the system. And most of the software house that claim using Agile is using use case diagram or UML approach in order to do the graphication specification. Okay, right. So if you deal with some domain that need calculation, okay, like for example medical field, for example the pharmacokinetic, the pharmacy fields and so on, it's involved a lot of mathematical specification. Okay, so this is few things, few ways that you can write the requirements specification. It's not limited to one. It's not limited to one, but this is the things. Okay, the guideline here is, okay, the guideline here is use a consistent language of it. Normally in English, you are going to use shall for a mandatory requirement. Okay, shall tu bermaksud kena adalah is a soft term than must. Must tu macam keras sikit, but shall should be actually is a must. But dalam lembut punya term, but should be included. If you need some things that good to have, then you should write should. Okay, bermaksud the system should able to do this. When it is should, bermaksud dia adalah option kepada programmers. Kalau boleh kita include, kalau tak boleh kita tak include. That is should. Kalau shall tu bermaksud must. If you want the programmers to really program it and so on, write down shall. S-H-A-L-L. It's a mandatory requirement. It's an important requirement to be included. Okay. Avoid from using jargon, especially for the user requirement. Dalam user requirement, gunakan layman term so that they can understand you. They can be verified by the user. Okay, verified by the user. And then you have to go through with the user requirement part. You have to go through with the user one by one. Walaupun banyak, saya tahu banyak. Kadang-kadang user awal-awal dia baca, sampai akhir dia flick through je. Tapi bila rasa dia kita dah produk dah nilisiat dan sebagainya, so dia verified, dia kata ini bukan saya nak, padahal dia dah spell out. Okay, so these are the things, these are the challenge. These are the challenge of writing the requirements and verify it. So this is an example. This is an example for the issuing pump. Okay, the system shall, gunakan shall, measure the blood sugar and deliver the issuing if required every 10 minutes. Maksud is a very technical part of the requirement, showing you how to measure and so on. The secondly is shall run a self-test routine. Okay, every minute trip is tested. This is a function. This is a functional requirement for the issuing pump for the embedded system yang ada. Maksud sistem tu kalau dia control, dia tahu dah kena drop berapa titik dan sebagainya, berapa lama dia nak in terms of the insulin pump systems and so on. Okay, so the structure specification can be a form-based specification. These are berapa jenis structure specification. So you can spell out, okay, in terms of the function, what will be the descriptions of it, what will be the input, what will be the source, what will be the output and destination. So this is in the tabulate form, example of tabulate form for the specification. Okay, so pre-condition, post-conditions and so on. Okay, so this is actually one format. Okay, one format is good when you're dealing with something with the domain requirement. Okay, domain requirement, you can write it this way. Especially kalau you write it this way, then bolehlah untuk you faham sikit. Kalau kita bukan domain expert, kita bukan domain expert. That's why, and then dia punya expert tu kalau nak verify, dia pun senang. In a very layman terms and so on. Okay. So, in the tabulate for specification, another one is tabulate. This one kalau kata dapat kat technical team tu memang happy lah. So dia dah tahu dah sugar level falling berapa ke berapa. Sugar level stable apa nak banding dengan apa. So this one is good and is good to have when you deal with, especially yang kami buat adalah tentang pharmacy drugs. So, pharmacokinetic yang calculate untuk drugs dosage dan sebagainya. Kami semua buat dalam tabulate specification so that the pharmacist is going to verify it. Betul ke tak? Dalam condition ni dose macam mana? Dalam condition ni dose macam mana? Dia senang dia nak verify. Okay, it's a tabulate specification. Again, it depends. It depends on your product. It depends on the domain expert. It depends on the system that you want to develop in order to specify which types of requirement writing skill is needed and suitable. Okay, right? So that is actually the parts for the requirement documentation. Okay, now is the third parts of today's topics is the requirement engineering processes. Okay, in the requirement engineering, okay, as we mentioned earlier, requirement engineering is the first step of the software engineering process. Okay, in the requirement engineering itself, we have some process inside the requirement engineering. That means when we want to gather the requirement, there are some generic activities that we have to do during the requirement engineering process. The first one is elicitation, bermaksud gathering, gathering of the requirement. Dalam first step untuk requirement engineering, kita kena collect the requirement. Okay, once we collect the requirement from our stakeholders, kalau stakeholders adalah doctors, you kena jumpa doctors. Kalau stakeholders ada nurse, you kena jumpa nurse. Kalau stakeholders ada manager daripada apa yang operational manager, you kena jumpa operational manager. Kalau you punya stakeholders ada untuk farmasi punya description, you kena pergi jumpa pharmacist dan sebagainya. So it depends. So it's actually the elicitations is the most important step. So you have to see your client, do a proper appointment with the client, plan the appointment with the stakeholders and so on in order to elicitate, to gather the requirement. Once you gather the requirement from the stakeholders, seorang cakap macam ni, seorang cakap macam ni, seorang cakap macam ni, semua different, different point of view, different perspective from the stakeholders. Now need you to sit down with your team, organize it, analyze it, categorize it. Okay, in the analysis you categorize it. Ini bahagian untuk input untuk patient saja. Ini bahagian proses untuk diagnosis saja. Ini untuk bahagian billing saja. Ini adalah untuk bahagian mana. You kena buat analisis daripada different stakeholders, different interview results dan sebagainya. You dapat, you analyze it. Okay, categorize it, clusterkan dia dan sebagainya, ikut function dan sebagainya. After that, set the priority. Mana yang priority pertama nak build, mana priority kedua, mana adalah list priorities and so on. You kena susunkan dia. After that, you have to see your stakeholders in order to validate it. Betul ke tak saya capture ni? Betul ke tak capture ni? Go through the validation process. After that, then you document it. Ini adalah requirement, software requirement specification version 1. Keluar satu version yang pertama. Okay, version 1 punya requirement management. This one link dengan mana stakeholders, this one sebut oleh stakeholder mana, this one oleh stakeholders mana dan sebagainya. So that will be the requirement management. The overview for it that we are going to cover for the last part of today's lecture. Okay, so we are talking about elicitation. We are talking about elicitations. So this is a spiral process. I already talked about the spiral. It's an ideal process. Combinations of what? Combinations of the prototype and waterfall. It's created by Dr. Buer. Okay, Dr. Buer from the University of Southern California. So created this spiral model in order to capture all the needs during the requirement engineering. So from the innermost, kita ada start. Kita go through the business requirement specification. Apa yang diperlukan oleh business processes dan sebagainya. Is that feasibility study boleh ke tak boleh buat? We come up with the elicitations of the user requirement. We go for the user specification, do some prototype. Prototype here is throw away prototype. And we go refine it with the system requirement and go for the system requirement specifications before we go for the final review and come up with the first versions of the SRS document. So this is the ideal module from Dr. Bowen. Okay, this is we call it spiral model. Okay, spiral model way. So this is actually from the certification, the professional certification for the requirement. So when we talk about elicitation alone, okay, dalam elicitation dengan analisis tu, what are the important things? The requirement sources. Kat mana puncanya kita nak dapatkan requirement? As I mentioned earlier, from all the stakeholders. Sit down. If you involve in the enterprise system, memang headache. Kalau once cakap je enterprise system, there is a lot of stakeholders. Siapa buat enterprise system? Saya rasa ada seorang buat enterprise system kan?
Saya pun ada buat.
Haziq Haziq. Beritahu sikit. You punya enterprise system punya stakeholder. Haziq ke?
Ya.
Haziq ke? Buat tentang enterprise system, bukan
Company saya tak buat. Saya lebih kepada external project.
External project. Kalau share lah sedikit HRMS tu.
Apa
Tak ada. Tak boleh ya? Tak boleh lah share.
nak share apa? Contoh.
Like for example, HRMS. Siapa yang stakeholder untuk HRMS? Human Resource Management System. Stakeholders. Okay, let's say brainstorm. Stakeholders untuk Human Resource Management System. Katakan you nak buat sesuatu Human Resource Management System. Different departments. Okay, right. Contohnya department apa?
IT department.
Stakeholders yang ada. IT department. You nampak je IT department. Department lain tak nampak lah. Lagi?
The human resource department itself.
Human resource ni, ialah human resource ni ramai. Human resource management system. Okay, thank you. Okay, human resource management system. When we talk about the stakeholders, identified, let's say question, identified stakeholders for human resource management system. Basically, who will be the stakeholders yang ada? Will be the employees, okay, adalah stakeholders for the system. Maksud dia akan gunakan sistem tersebut. Okay. Lepas tu adalah kalau melibatkan dia punya lagi payment. Okay, payment. Okay, payment. Melibatkan dia punya kebajikan dia. Okay. So melibatkan cuti dan sebagainya, itu adalah ada stakeholders juga. Melibatkan satu lagi adalah disebabkan, contoh dia kata IT department, okay, IT department of the human resource, okay, human resource management. Performance, okay, dia setiap tahun ada KPI dia hantar kena performance, okay, performance untuk sesuatu. Melibatkan sales, kalau melibatkan sales dia perlukan sales untuk report dan sebagainya. So these are some of the human resource management system that a lot of stakeholders. So meaning that will be the source for us to actually gather the requirement. Another one is based on the documents. Kalau you especially related to the existing system and so on, you have to go for the documentation. What will be the existing system documentations, the SRS, SDD, and so on. If you have the test, or the test results and so on. So this is actually the things that you can as a source to refer. Again, if the system still working well. So you kena tengok balik sistem tu. Apa kelemahan sistem yang sedia ada, mana yang you perlu improve dan sebagainya. That will be the requirement sources. The first sources, the important. Okay. Secondly is the stakeholder list. You have to know the stakeholder details. What will be the rules for the stakeholders, the interest of the stakeholders and availability. Okay, stakeholders mana yang paling penting dalam you punya sistem tu, stakeholder list tu mana yang paling penting dalam list, apa role dia, apa peranan dia. So ada tak dia akan minat kepada sistem yang ni ataupun reluctant untuk nak bagi kerjasama. Kita kena identify ni, Then check the schedule for the stakeholders in order to plan for the meeting, to plan for the interview. Jangan you susun dah jadual sampai time stakeholders tu, stakeholders memang kata dia nak outstation. Okay, so akan macam start lah, you tak rapat lah elicitation tu. So that's why you have to list out the stakeholders, who is important as a source for the requirement, siapa yang key person you nak capture untuk dapatkan requirements tersebut. Okay, so that will be the challenge when you deal with a legacy system nanti. Okay, legacy system, a lot of stakeholders involved, you kena jumpa dengan ramai orang untuk nak verify lagi dan sebagainya. So that will going to take a very long time in order to develop, especially a large system. Okay, involve a lot of stakeholders. Okay. So the third ones here, when do the elicitation, the important things here is rules for collaboration. Okay, rules for collaboration. What will be, is there any copyright issue? Okay, is there any copyright issue kalau dia melibatkan sesuatu lah, sesuatu yang melibatkan certain IP issues, you have to get to know, is that you have a copyright issue or not? Contoh kami pernah identify adalah pictures. Make sure that client you dah bagi, client kata saya akan ada pictures yang banyak yang cantik-cantik tu, dia akan bagi. Make sure that you clear on the copyright issue. Jangan kata yang image yang client provide tu you guna nanti kena sue. So that's why you have to really identify, is there any copyright issues related to certain things or not. Okay? Kalau melibatkan image dan sebagainya, biasa kita akan, kalau suruh kami akan ambil image yang memang orang kata boleh guna. Maksud dia tak ada copyright issue, boleh diguna pakai untuk image tersebut. Okay, responsibility. Okay, when we talk about collaboration, if you have a collaboration, okay, if you need the collaborations, meaning that the system involve few parties here. Okay, involve few parties, and you have to develop the system, and you have to get the agreement. You have to get the so-called the blessing from the other parties in order to develop the system. Okay, in order to develop the system. For example lah, paling senang punya scenario ataupun analogi dia adalah final year project lah. Okay, final year project. Let's say your final year project, your supervisor is your supervisors, and you have a co-supervisor from the industry. Okay, you have a co-supervisors from the industry. So, in that kinds of things, you have to really cross-check. Kalau produk ni jadi, milik siapa? Milik UiTM ke? Milik industri ke? Kalau orang industri tu nak beli, ada tak, ataupun industri tu nak guna, ada tak copyright issue, siapa responsibility, apa agreement between the UiTM and also the industry. So these kinds of things actually is a rules for collaboration. Okay, especially involve the agreement and also monetary issue. Okay, melibatkan duit. Okay, so benda-benda macam ni yang kita kena highlight lah, kita kena tahu. Okay, during the elicitation, is there any copyright issue? Kalau dia kata formula ni saya punya, is that dah patent ke belum? Contoh macam farmasi yang kami deal ni, kami beritahu kalau benda ni keluar, pemasuk dia akan automatically tell others about the formula. You dah patent ke belum? Oh, dia kata, oh saya lupa patent. Cepat tu dia pergi patentkan dan sebagainya. It's our responsibility untuk patentkan. But it's the client. We only alert the client saying that if the website's already available, people were going to actually know your formula. Please make sure that if that is an issue, please copyright it ataupun patent dia. So we highlight to the clients about it. Okay, we highlight to the clients about it. Okay, any issue and any not add on ke? Dalam requirement elicitation, ini okay? Boleh? I'm going too fast. Boleh dengar ke? Ataupun tak dengar? Boleh? Okay, okay, right. Okay, next, move on to the Kano model. Pernah dengar tak Kano model? Tak pernah
Tak pernah.
Pernah dengar tak Kano? Tak pernah Okay, Kano model is very interesting Kano model. Dalam elicitation saya pernah saya gunakan model ni, saya rasa very useful lah. Somehow Kano model ni allow us to think of out of the box. Okay, out of the box. So that's why Kano model ni dia adalah 3 factors yang ada. One is the basic factors. Second one is the performance factors. The other one is the assignment factors. Okay. What is the basic factors? Basic factors kita namakan dalam kurungan these certifiers. Okay. So another one adalah performance factors, we call it certifiers. And the last one we call it delighters. Okay, delighters, assignment factors. Okay, let's put it in an example. Let's say you want to develop satu handphone lah, katakan satu handphone. Okay. So katakan you dapat satu projek nak buatkan satu handphone. Kita ada atas market kita ada jenama Samsung. Kita ada jenama Apple, kita ada jenama lain. Let's say you want to design a handphone. Okay, design a handphone. Okay, what will be that you want to in the handphone? Apa yang you rasa you nak perlu dalam handphone tersebut? Cuba brainstorm. Cuba cakap, cuba answer. Suara orang-orang lain pun dengar Okay. Kalau you nak design satu handphone, apa yang you perlu? Kamera lagi.
Storage, doktor.
Storage, okay.
Ada lambang buah doktor.
Apa dia?
Lambang buah.
Ada apa?
Dia kata ada lambang buah.
Lambang buah. Aduh.
Logo,
Okay,
design
lagi?
logo.
Logo, okay. Logo lagi?
Screen, bateri, RAM, processor.
Screen, battery, RAM, processor lagi?
Boleh call orang.
Boleh call orang. Okay, lagi? Okay, kita ada few things few things here. Katakan okay, let's say tadi tu siapa tu? Kamera. Okay, lagi? Tadi tu kata boleh call.
Storage, doktor.
Lagi?
Storage.
H. Okay, lagi?
Processor, touch.
Processor kena cepat. Okay. Lagi?
Boleh tengok
Okay, ada logo kan?
Logo, doktor.
Ha?
Interface, kena menarik.
Lagi? Interface dia. Interface dia macam mana?
Yang menarik lah, doktor.
Kena menarik. Okay. Ada lagi tak? OS. Okay. Battery. Size untuk handphone tu. Okay.
Ya, doktor.
Okay, size untuk model. Nak besar ke nak kecil?
Moderate price.
Okay, ada lagi tak? Price.
Ada.
Okay. Right. Ada lagi tak? Tu je handphone you nak Kalau you nak design handphone itu je you nak. Headphone jack. Okay, lagi. Alright. Okay, let's say kita brainstorm yang ni Brainstorm yang ni untuk handphone. Right. Ikut Kano model yang ada, ikutkan Kano model ada, kita ada 3 benda. Okay, 3 benda. Satu adalah basic. Okay, satu adalah performance. Satu adalah excitement. Okay, right. Daripada benda 3 ni, okay, back to our slides here. Okay, benda 3 ni. Okay, kita ada basic factors. Let's say, satu handphone yang keluar, apa basic factors? Tadi sebut core orang. Okay, basic factors dia adalah core orang. Hantar message. Okay, so sometimes we forget about the basic factors. Okay, sometimes we forget about the basic factors. And then client kita tak spell out pun disebabkan dia too basic. So if you not realize on it, you didn't include it, that will dissatisfy the client. That's why we call it dissatisfier. Maksud adalah basic factors. Klien pun rasa benda ni perlu ni. Tak payah sebut kot. Tapi disebabkan dia lupa sebut, you pun lupa tanya, dan kita forget about it. Dan bila sistem keluar, produk keluar, dia jadi dissatisfier. Benda yang basic, klien kata, benda yang basic lah, you takkanlah tak tahu. So that is dissatisfiers. Meaning that when you design a product, you have to look at the basic things that needed by the product, essential factors of it. Sesuatu produk kena ada, satu handphone, nama dia handphone, kena boleh lah call orang. Boleh hantar SMS, hantar message. Okay? Benda tu sebagai satu basic factors yang ada. Maksud handphone macam mana pun, daripada zaman dulu punya handphone sampai sekarang, that will be the basic factors yang ada. Once you handphone tu basic factors that ada, bermaksud is useless. These satisfiers. That's why kita namakan these satisfiers. Okay. So, in terms of performance factors, contohnya performance wise, in terms of you kata OS dia, performance dia laju dan sebagainya. So, ambil gambar, contohlah ambil gambar di mana kamera, okay, front ada, back ada, dulu hanya back, sekarang ada front lagi dan sebagainya. So, that is the performance factors. Performance factors that are going to satisfy your client. Client kata, baguslah, laju ni, benda ni, website ni baguslah. Bila keluar suruh search semua dapat, accurate dia punya tu. Actually is a performance factors. Search result, you sebagai satu holiday package, you buat filter, keluar je filter, dia filter dengan result yang betul-betul exactly the user want to search and so on. That will be the performance factors. Meaning that is a satisfier. We're going to satisfy your client. Most of the things that performance factors is the factors that highlight by the client. Highlight the client, what should be included in the handphone and so on. Itu adalah performance factors yang ada. Okay. Excitement factors yang kita ni kadang-kadang kita lupa. Okay. So that's why the most important thing is actually carikan excitement factors. That will going to catch your client hearts. Kita cari something that innovative. Kita cari something that is creative. That will be the excitement factors that you're going to win the tender. So that is the delighter factors yang ada. Maksud kita think out of the box. Apa yang ada handphone sekarang dan sekarang ni macam mana kita nak develop something yang out of it. Ataupun website sekarang ni. Contoh adalah QR code. Kita pergi My Sejahtera, kita klik QR code, dia dapat klik masuk ke kedai tersebut. But what will be the excitement factors yang ada kalau saya nak improve? Maybe adalah numbers of count dalam kedai tersebut. Dia automatically count. Siapa masuk kedai dia luas macam mana, sebagainya, dia dah tahu. Kalau masuk sampai 10 orang yang ke-11 nak masuk dia tak boleh. Oh, maybe that will be the assignment factors that I can design. I can design for the macam QR code reader tu dia akan dapat detect. Selain daripada dia detect, dia kira orang nak masuk kedai tersebut. Location yang sama, tempat yang sama, masuk dia kira. Okay, kedai tu dengan keluasan berapa dia directly dah ratiokan dia dah. Boleh hanya 10 orang. Orang yang ke-11 masuk dah tak boleh. Contohlah. So that will be the assignment factors yang ada. Okay, so do you clear mate? 3 contoh yang ada.
Doktor,
Is that?
doktor.
Yes, yes.
Saya nak confirm, ada tak macam
Ya, cakap.
kalau performance factors tu kan salah satunya kamera ada fungsi depan belakang. Kalau macam kamera tu ada fungsi AI, dia termasuk dalam performance ataupun excitement factors?
Excitement. Kalau dia ada AI. Performance factors that will be normal. Tapi bila dia ada AI, okay, tapi bila dia you embedded dengan AI, that will be category delighter. Kita akan wow factor. The wow factors between normal performance with the wow factors yang ada. Itu adalah assignment factors. Assignment factors tu yang menjadikan produk you sellable. Produk you ada competitive factors dengan orang lain. Maksudnya boleh compete dengan orang lain. That's why apabila kita sebagai products, orang kata design for one software product dan sebagainya, besides thinking from the basic factors, besides thinking of the performance factors, please spend some time to find the excitement factors. Excitement factors tu yang menjadikan your product different from others. Okay, it's a wow factors different from others. Okay, same thing go to your apps development. Orang punya apps macam ni, you dah tengok apps A, B, C, D, orang lain buat macam ni. Okay, bermaksud you dah cater dah basic factors. You dah cater dah untuk performance factors. But in terms to catch the hearts of your client, to win some tenders and so on, you need some assigned factors yang ada. Okay, am I answer your question? Boleh faham ke? Untuk
Boleh.
AI tu. Alright, okay. So that is the things that we have to bear in mind. We have to bear in mind on it. So that's why sometimes elicitation, we call it discovery. Bermaksud kita discover lah. Discover the things between the end user, the manager, the engineer, whoever involved. Okay, so that means we have to actually discover the requirement from all types of stakeholders yang ada. So when we talk about it, is this beside from discovery, as I mentioned earlier, you have to know how to classify it and organize it, because different stakeholders, different interviewee dan sebagainya, you akan dapat different set of requirements. Okay, so it's when you after you gather it, so you have to classify it, organize it. Okay, organize it. Ini adalah bahagian untuk input saja. Ini adalah bahagian untuk filtering. Ini adalah bahagian untuk sorting. Ini adalah bahagian untuk apa? Ini bahagian untuk payment. Ini bahagian apa? Bermaksud you kena classify it and organize it before you put it in the formal documentation and specification. Okay, so the third one here I want to highlight is a priority. Bermaksud requirement ada banyak. Mana yang jadi priority, mana yang kita boleh negotiate. Okay, negotiate here is different stakeholders will have a different point of view. Okay, mungkin stakeholder A saying that detail of it very important. Stakeholder B kata detail tu tak berapa importance and so on. So in that kinds of scenario, you have to highlight it to your client. Okay, daripada department ni beritahu report kena dalam bentuk macam mana. Dalam department ni dia nak send report tapi dia hanya require benda yang penting ni saja dan sebagainya. So what will be the things that you want to negotiate, the client have to agree upon. Okay, kalau boleh kita tak nak keluarkan apa yang kita kata sepatutnya satu je requirement untuk management. Terpaksa kita kena keluarkan banyak apa yang types of reports differently. Separate, ada satu yang nak hide, satu tak nak hide dan sebagainya. Information yang ada. So that's why it needs you to negotiate between the client. Again, the communication is very important. once you elicitate or once you discover some requirement that have conflict, so you have to spell out to your client and make it clear before you put it in the document. Any question? Okay, so this is actually very basic things about the requirement discovery punya diagram. So daripada elicitation, dalam elicitation kita ada few proses lagi. Okay, requirement elicitations, kita ada requirement discovery, okay, interacting with the stakeholder in order to discover the requirements, and the domain requirements are also discovered at that stage. Bermaksud domain requirement adalah from the expert lah. You jumpa dengan expert, interview them, get some things to be done, gather the requirements and so on. After that, baru you classify, organize it, group it together into a clusters, and before you do some priority requirements and resolve all the conflict, need some negotiations. If there is a conflict and so on, need some negotiation. Okay. Kalau sistem tu simple, klien tu tak ramai, seorang ke dua, that will be easier. Pada yang tepi tu boleh solve it very quickly. However, when you have an enterprise system that needs a lot of agreement between the stakeholders, that will be the difficulties, and you are going to have a very tough time during negotiation. Because some of the personnel, they are power over. Maksud dia gunakan power dia kata ini yang penting. Disebabkan yang cakap tu manager. Seorang tu adalah ini penting, tapi yang cakap tu hanya staff biasa kerani. So bila macam tu, manager akan menang disebabkan dia gunakan power guna organization. So that's why we have to negotiate. Okay, we have to negotiate. Yes. Ada pengalaman
So kalau macam tu Doktor, kita nak ikut yang management ke nanti dia orang decide dulu ke? Sebab dia orang tengah macam contoh apa, tiba-tiba dia orang ada pencanggahan dia orang.
Okay, that's why. Pencanggahan dia orang. Okay. This kinds of situation, you biasa settle macam mana? You pengalaman you settle macam mana?
Biasanya betul-betul yang buat benda tu.
Manager cakap lain.
Manager kita ikut
pekerja cakap lain.
Kita akan ikut yang orang yang betul-betul related. Macam manager akan betul flow je. Yang orang yang involve betul-betul baru tahu betul-betul flow. Kita akan ikut yang
okay. So you akan dengar yang mana?
Akan dengar yang bawah.
Dengar yang bawah. Ke atas tu tak nak bayar. Macam mana?
Yang kita buat macam tu.
Dengar yang bawah, atas tu tak nak bayar. Dia kata apa yang saya nak.
Kita dengar both. Tapi
macam mana yang nak settle?
Akan ikut yang bawah. Sebab yang bawah yang akan handle benda tu.
Okay, right. So that's why need a negotiation and agreement. Okay, need a negotiation and agreement. So kita adalah gunakan operational. That's why kita ada few techniques here. Okay, there are few techniques here. Problems in the requirement. Certain times stakeholders express their requirement in their terms. Okay, contoh that's why dia adalah conflict. Different stakeholders might have conflict requirements and so on. Okay, somehow some of the political factors or organization factors might influence the system requirement. Macam saya kata lah, dia power over. Maksud dia kata saya adalah manager, saya know better the flow and so on. You siapa? You kerani je masukkan data, ikut apa yang saya cakap. So that kinds of factors So during these kinds of scenarios and so on, there are something that we can use. There is something that we can use. So these are, nanti kita akan cater bahagian yang untuk techniques yang ada. So these are the process. These are the process that interactions is with the stakeholder from the manager to the external regulators. Okay. So these are the stakeholder. Contoh stakeholders yang ada. Maksud stakeholders untuk mental health care patient management system. It's not only the personnel in charge. Patient pun dalam kita kira stakeholders. Doctors, kita stakeholders. Nurses, stakeholders. Receptionists yang menjadikan appointment pun stakeholders. IT staff, stakeholders. Ethics manager, the healthcare manager managed to attend the information, the record staff and so on. These are all the stakeholders for a system. Okay. So you are able actually how you can able to identify lah. So when you deal with a system, paling penting list, tadi kata tu, list of stakeholders. Siapa yang akan bagi input kepada sistem tersebut? List out. Cross check with the client. Betul tak? Siapa lagi lah yang you terlepas pandang dalam penggunaan sistem ni? Okay, make sure that you deal with them. Okay, list out properly. Okay, so what is the things that you have to elicitate? What is the time now? It's already 10:43. You orang sampai pukul 11 kan? Is that pukul 11 ya?
Ya doktor, 11 sampai
12 kan? 12 saya continue
11.
lah. Okay. Alright. So I think I sampai sini dulu kot. Okay, because this will be quite numbers of slides that I want to go through, and this is important. So I try to cover it next week lah. So just now back to the things that we discussed. Okay. Tadi ada yang cakap tentang ada conflict between top management and the operational staff yang ada. So basically macam tadi tu yang share tu, dia kata top management beritahu adalah flow. Betul, I agree. Dia hanya tahu flow. Yang betul-betul tahu sesuatu sistem ada masalah ke tak untuk certain data, ada masalah tak untuk certain key in, apa yang sufficient tak sufficient dan sebagainya adalah operational. Maksud dia yang people that use the system, dia akan beritahu. That's why kita dalam elicitation technique next week, kita akan go through apa teknik-teknik yang kita boleh guna pakai dari segi interview, dari segi observation, dari segi creative techniques yang ada, supaya kita tahu adalah teknik yang sesuai dalam keadaan yang macam mana, supaya kita dapat confirmkan kita punya requirement with quite effectively. Okay, so any last questions before I end out the class, because we have to take a break before you start another class. So setakat ni 23 orang, termasuk saya lah kan, 24. So we have 23. Ada yang tak register lagi ke? Kerana dalam sistem semalam saya check 22 orang saja. Register lagi ke? Semua dah tulis nama kan?
Sudah doktor.
Semua dah tulis nama? Semua dah tulis. Nazim very good lah. Nazim jadi ketua ketua dalam grup banyak cakap. Okay, very good. Okay,
Tak ada
very
Reza,
good.
doktor Reza.
Yang lain? Saya Okay, alright. Okay, yang lain soalan tak? Before we end out the session for today. Apa yang you nak highlight, apa yang you nak share, apa yang you rasa you boleh untuk nak ada soalan nak tanya? Ada tak? Tak ada.
Tak ada doktor.
Okay, so try, right, thank you Haziq. Okay. Try to get the notes, try to get the notes. As I mentioned to you, apa yang saya pentangkan ni adalah some actually cover on some of the details actually inside it. Okay, inside the yang notes yang ada saya dah upload dalam literature. Right, so very quickly, sorry saya lupa satu benda kat sini. Sorry. We have a few minutes to end it. Okay, I already put it, I mentioned to you early in the lecture. It's related to this one. Nampak ke?
Nampak doktor.
Nampak screen saya? Alright. So
Nampak,
this is assessment 1. Assessment 1. As I mentioned to you, I already created a folder. I created actually under assignment, assignment punya folder. Saya ada letak satu question. This is a question. Discuss the requirement engineering challenges and issue in a mobile application development. Okay, discuss the requirement engineering challenges and issue in mobile application development. This will be your assessment 1. Okay, assessment 1 ni 20% tau. Make sure you do it properly. Okay, 20%, 20% out of the continual assessment yang ada. Okay, what should be inside your answer? Your answer, I would like to see the elaborations on the requirement engineering process. Okay, you have one paragraph briefly talk about the requirement engineering yang ada. So another paragraph talk about the mobile application development, what is the mobile application development dan sebagainya. Okay, then the most paragraph will be focused on the challenges and issue. Okay, it needs you to read papers yang ada. Saya highlight kat sini, saya perlukan 10 references. Preferable 10 references ni, preferable is journals and proceeding from Google Scholar. Okay, maksud you letak Google Scholar, you letak dalam Google Scholar, like for example here. Okay, Google Scholar is the place that you can get all the journals and proceeding yang ada. Okay, kat sini. Let's say you adalah untuk requirement engineering class mobile applications development. Let's say so you click on it, you are going to see there is a numbers of challenges, ada paper dan sebagainya. Okay, ini adalah anytime. You want to keep the most recent, boleh letak since 2020, since 19, okay, since 2016, dia akan beritahulah apa paper dan sebagainya. So you boleh click on it lah. Okay, click on it. Okay. So that is a relevance lah, relevancy, sort by relevance. Maksud apa yang relevant dengan apa yang you nak type. Okay. You nak letak. Okay, this is the things that you can actually baca lah, ambil cara-cara untuk ambil papers yang ada. Right. So prepare your answer in 3 pages, A4 size. Okay, A4 size of 3 pages. A4 size of 3 pages. Single spacing. Font dia Times New Romans. Font size of 12. Okay, that is a requirement for the answer. Okay, name your file as accordingly. Letak nama you contoh macam Nazim, letak Nazim kat sini. Jangan letak your name. Letak Nazim, N-A-Z-E-M. Okay, Nazim. Email the document through the assignment folder in your future. Submit it, submit it. So that I can monitor who submitting, who is not submitting and so on. Okay. Due date for this assignment is 22nd of November. Okay, saya rasa dah sufficient kot. Lebih kurang dalam 3 minggu. Okay, untuk assessment ni. Okay, untuk assessment ni. So any questions? You can try to Google it first. Next week kalau ada soalan apa-apa boleh tanya saya berkaitan dengan assessment 1 ni.
Kalau lebih 3 page, tak apa doktor?
Jangan. Kenapa? Lebih 3 page, masalah dia, lebih 3 page kemungkinan student ni, sorry, kalau lebih 3 page ni, kebanyakan student copy paste. Kenapa saya nak suruh kata 3 page ni? Supaya you synthesize it, read, synthesize it, and then kalau nak untuk checking, buat checking, create account kat Grammarly. Okay. Ada satu website nama dia Grammarly. Dia adalah free free checking for grammar. Okay. Untuk master student, biasakan gunakan Grammarly ni create satu account, free je. Create satu account. You letak dokumen kat situ, you boleh baiki. Yes, 3 pages including references. 3 pages including references. Memasukkan jawab dalam 2 page setengah.
Doktor, kita nak buat macam case study Kita nak buat macam case study, terangkan tentang case study tu ke atau kita terangkan secara general? I mean kita ambil satu macam
Terangkan
contoh
secara
tadi,
general. Saya tak nak
Oh general, okay.
Saya tak nak. Tak nak kata you kata oh satu mobile application. Let's say mobile application A, apa challenges dan dia. Tak, saya tak nak yang tu. Saya nak general. Contoh kalau you nak create mobile application development. Apa requirement engineering punya challenge? Apa requirement engineering punya challenge yang ada? In terms of dia punya screen ke, in terms of dia punya types of mobile ke, in terms of dia punya let's say the space usage of the mobile application ke, ataupun macam mana? Instead of the deployment ke, challenge ke apa. So what kind of actually the requirement engineering tu? Only limited to the requirement engineering apa yang dia punya challenges. Okay? You can read through, download few papers to read through and we can discuss further next week. Kalau if you have questions. Boleh? Okay, I think that's all. Okay, if no question.
Doktor, mesti daripada paper je. Kalau based on experience boleh ke doktor?
Saya nak based on paper. Kalau you experience, you hanya sebagai contoh. Azman, you letak, kalau you ada experience, bagus adalah contoh. You kata ada teori, lepas tu you kata experience tu. Okay? From my point of view ataupun from my experience developing a mobile applications, I found this issue is relevant adalah macam mana. Tapi you kena ada teori part lah Azman. That is how you can add on.
Okay.
Cara tulis tu saya lagi prefer. Maksud dia theoretically you link dengan challenge apa. Let's say challenge dia adalah tentang requirement, masa adalah requirement engineering tu adalah berkaitan dengan screen ataupun heterogeneity issue. Okay, isu melibatkan heterogeneity bermaksud user you, client you kata dia nak jenis mobile application yang jenis yang macam mana. So apabila macam tu, apa isu dia? Okay, isu requirement engineering, apa isu dia? Lepas tu you ada theoretical part and then you boleh ambil satu sentence lagi from the experience of developing a mobile application related to apa area, you found out this issue is relevant because of apa. So that will be added value. Okay, sesiapa yang bekerja memang itu added value. So bermaksud you daripada experience yang ada. Okay, that will be good for your papers. For the essay lah. Ini saya kategori ke essay je. 2 page setengah. Karena setengah page lagi adalah references. So you just have to write 2.5 pages of it. Okay?
Doktor, citation nak buat ke?
So this will be your first assignment.
Citation.
Citation. You pandai tak untuk citation? Kalau pandai untuk citation, you can put citation.
Format apa?
Kalau you pandai lah.
Kalau tak buat pun boleh kan doktor kan? Kalau tak buat pun boleh kan? Nanti
apa dia?
kalau tak buat citation.
Kalau tak buat pun tak boleh. Tak boleh. Saya punya adalah essay je. Bermaksud I want you to read and give your point of view. Apa yang you baca adalah requirement engineering, issue dengan challenges. Okay, dalam mobile application yang you baca through your readings, through the literature, you found out that adalah isu-isu yang ni dia highlight. Is that relevant? You boleh, kalau ada experience, you letak experience you dan sebagainya. So without any citation, boleh, saya boleh terima. But you have to put the references. Okay, you have to put the references. Is that clear? This will be your first assignment. Orang lain tak bagi lagi kot. Lecturer lain tak bagi lagi. Betul Ini adalah first assignment.
Betul doktor.
Betul Siapa suruh saya adalah first class tu kena adalah first assignment. Okay, I think you already have 3 minutes to take a break untuk nak pergi. Okay, Sarah? Ada nak tanya ke?
Tak ada tadi.
Alright. Okay, right. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much and hope to see you again next week.
Okay, thank you doktor.
Alright. Okay, take care everyone. Stay safe.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum.
doktor.
Thank you, Doctor.